समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा?
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is in Russia in what some are calling a pre-scheduled visit, but the timing could not be more significant. The visit of Ajit Doval comes as Trump has made his second threat in 24 hours on significantly increasing tariffs against India. India has called out the hypocrisy of the Western world, the United States in particular, when it comes to Russian trade. A firm press statement from the foreign ministry spoke about $3.5 billion of trade between the United States and Russia last year alone. I'm Barkha, Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. On the program today, we continue to look at how India is responding to the threats from Donald Trump. At the moment, NSA Ajit Doval is in Russia. Was this pre-scheduled or has the timing been deployed to make a statement to Donald Trump? Meanwhile, Donald Trump was confronted with India's facts and figures on how America continues to import fertilizers as well as uranium from Russia. Donald Trump's response was, I don't know. We'll have to get back to you on that. India released those facts and figures to call out Western hypocrisy when it comes to the issue of trade with Russia, pointing out that both the EU and America continue to do business with Russia. In fact, Trump's special envoy is scheduled to visit Moscow as well later this month. But Trump seems to have something personal against India at this point. Does it all come down to the credit he so desperately wanted for Operation Sindoor? India has drawn its red line and taken a defiant position, also made it clear that we will decide as a country who we do trade with and how. But what happens next? How does this all end? And how should it all end? Let's introduce our guests on the program today as we look at Trump's tantrums, his tirade on the issue of tariffs when it comes to India. We can bring up our guests now, and let me welcome Tavleen Singh to the program, veteran author, journalist, columnist. Good to see you. Veteran diplomat, Ambassador Yash Sinha is with us. Good to see you on the program. And one of India's foremost strategic affairs analysts, Sushant Sareen, is with us. Good to see you, Sushant. Welcome, everybody. Let me actually just play out this little clip from Donald Trump. This is kind of incredible. The President of the United States of America has penalized India for buying Russian oil. When confronted with facts and figures on America's own trade with Russia, this is what he says.
President, India says that the US imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yeah, please.
So he brushes off the question. He says, I don't know anything about that, and we'll have to get back to you on this. Ambassador Yash Sinha, maybe he genuinely doesn't know. Maybe he genuinely hasn't been briefed. So, NSA Doval in Russia, Jaishankar scheduled to visit later this month, could have been pre-scheduled. The timing takes on a different meaning right now. What do you make of all that's going on?
Barkha, before I answer your question, I'd like to just preface my remarks. I feel that the India-US relationship is extremely important to us, and I think to the United States too. And what I think it was Barack Obama who said that this relationship is going to be the defining partnership for the 21st century. I think I sincerely believe that. I certainly believed it then. Now, given that, I think we need to tread very carefully here. We are dealing with somebody whom is unique. We all know that. The previous incumbents in the White House were different, Republicans or Democrats. And since our nuclear tests in 1998, both sides have assiduously cultivated each other. So we need to keep that in perspective. As far as whether President Trump knew about the tariffs, about the trade that US conducts with Russia, or the EU conducts with Russia, I think is not that important, simply because I think there is something more than just tariffs. Whether we have misread him wrong, whether we've handled him wrong, I wouldn't like to speculate. I'm sure through official channels and otherwise, we have conveyed to the decision makers, may not be to President Trump directly, but certainly his close advisors, about our position regarding the tariffs. 5 rounds of negotiations have taken place. I'm sure the negotiators would have briefed President Trump or his chief of staff or his deputy chief of staff, who has been quoted recently on India-US relations, about the state of play. So I personally feel that it is something that we need to wait and watch. The penalty tariff that is coming our way, I think what it has done is basically steeled our resolve. I think it's had exactly the opposite effect of what it was intended to do.
Yeah. Sushant, somebody else said, and I think Yash Sinha is flagging that point, that you basically have to save the Indo-US relationship from Trump, or you have to look beyond Trump. And there will be a time, when Trump won't be there. In any case, there's a cap in America on more than 2 terms and so on. That said, I just want to share some of these figures. In 2024, the United States imported fertilizers from Russia worth $1.27 billion. In 2024, the United States imported uranium and plutonium worth $624 million. The total value of the trade between US and Russia last year alone was $3.5 billion. The American president says he doesn't know these figures. India is effectively saying you're a hypocrite. Ambassador Yash Sinha is saying, all right, but there's a larger relationship at play. We've got to move more carefully. We can't be emotional. What do you say?
No, I agree with what Ambassador Sinha is saying, that the relationship, at least, I think I would imagine from both sides, is very important. But then, Barkha, you also have to ask yourself, at what price? There has to be some price, na, that if it's an important relationship, why is it important? It is important because the Americans get something out of me and I get something out of the Americans. Yeah. But it cannot be a one-way street where you have the president of the United States who doesn't want a trade deal. He wants you to abjectly surrender before him, genuflect before him, prostrate before him. And that I don't see how any self-respecting country, the Europeans can call him daddy. I don't see how the Prime Minister of India can say he's my bab. I don't see how we can do that. I don't see how Mr. Modi can survive in office if he was to say that India depends only on the largest that we get from the Americans. And that, yes, I am willing to go into servitude of America because Trump wants it and because I want to save this relationship. If the relationship is important, it has to be important from both sides. That is one. Secondly, on this whole trade deal, and look, hypocrisy is part of the game as far as politics and international relations is concerned. So I don't have any problem with countries becoming hypocritical. We have our own share of hypocrisy. We used to talk about, we never spoke about Czechoslovakia or Hungary or Afghanistan because it didn't serve our interests. So yes, countries are hypocritical. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is that in this particular case, if this was a trade deal, the Indian side had shown enormous flexibility. We had gone way out to strike a deal with these guys, of course, with some red lines thrown in. Now, the problem is that when you have a done deal with the negotiators take it to the president, and then he changes the goalpost at the last minute because he doesn't want to compromise on anything. He wants you to give him 0 tariffs, but he will charge you 10% plus, right? How does this work in the international economic situation? How is this fair trade? How is this even free trade? I can understand the Americans saying that, okay, fine, we've had this very liberalized kind of a trade and we need to tighten it a bit. I completely understand that part of it. But it cannot be that I will be charged 0 tariff. This is the East India Company model. I will you will not charge me any tariff. I will charge you fabulous tariffs, and then I will penalize you, and then I will force you to invest. Now, yesterday there's a clip doing the rounds, and this is not an AI generated clip. This is a proper interview of Trump where he's asked about the investments from Europe. And I don't know if he even understands what investments, foreign direct investments are anymore, because he seems to believe that the Europeans are going to pump in $600 billion, literally handing them to the US government to spend it the way they want to spend it. Now, if this is his understanding of how foreign investment takes place, and he's literally forcing the Europeans to do it, and the Japs and perhaps some of the Arab states have also promised him this, I don't know what world he's living in. He's completely gone cuckoo, right? The problem is not that we have to tide over 3 years of him. The problem is, what if he is replaced by a similar character next time around? Then what do you do? At what point of time do you say, okay, fine, enough is enough. Now we'll have to start looking for alternatives. That's not going to be easy. This is going to cause a lot of problems in India, strategically, economically, politically, diplomatically. I agree with all of that. But then somewhere along the line, we'll have to draw the red line. Otherwise, we'll have to say that, okay, fine, we are going into receivership of America or the protectorate of America. If that is the direction we want to follow, yeah, we can do that. But I don't see how that's going to be a sellable proposition in India.
So let me get in Tavleen at this point. I think Sushant's parallel with East India Company is an interesting one. I think basically if you ask a lot of Indians who may not even understand what are tariffs, what's at stake, they would basically say exactly this, that Trump wants you to bend on both knees before him. That's actually what he wants. This has gone well beyond trade. There's also an element of his own volatility. These images that we are showing, he randomly came out on the roof. He started waving to the press from there. He is an inherently unpredictable, and I'm being polite here, character. But no Indian prime minister is going to genuflect before an American or any other foreign president. So what really are the options here?
Well, for a start, I think we need to look at this in a little bit bigger, on a bigger canvas. Steve Witkoff is also in Moscow today. Right?
Yeah.
I actually think that that he's trying to bully India, but he's actually trying to bully Russia into behaving, because these extra, the extra tariffs that are going to be charged will, he's trying to get the Russians to accept that if they continue to sell oil to India and China, which are the biggest buyers, that they will suffer, that they're going to close off that market. So look at it that way. That's one thing that we have to pay attention to. We don't know whether this is just bullying or not. So, let's not get all hysterical about the East India Company and all that. We need to get the chip off our shoulders, Sushant. For God's sake, India is capable of building an economy within India that would survive all this turbulence that's going on. And we need to start doing that. But we also need to ask why he's not threatening China, which buys, I think, a hell of a lot more oil than we do from Russia. He hasn't said one word about China. Why is that? What are our policymakers getting wrong in all this? That we're not seeing what's really going on. And when we seem to have very few people in Washington who are giving us real feedback on whether the rumor that, he felt offended by Modi, because everything for him is personal, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, there's too little information going around. And I really think that this is much more, what's going on today in Moscow is much more about getting the Russians to behave. Right, and
so,
of course we need.
But when you say let's not get hysterical about East India Company, I mean, which country would like to be spoken to in this manner, spoken of in this manner? I understand that it's cold-blooded geopolitics, but there is something called self-respect. Or do you not think that matters?
Absolutely, we shouldn't at all kowtow. We shouldn't. We should say, okay, we take our chances. Since you're not accepting the deal. We'll find other markets, like Canada has said. We can do that too. So I think absolutely we should stand our ground. But what we also seem to be missing out is the bigger canvas. I would like to get our ambassador, whoever he is in Washington, to give much more feedback. Because with Trump, one thing is very clear. The only thing that is predictable about him, everything is personal. So when it was personally, Putin was his friend, then, Putin was fine. So, when Modi was his friend, then personally, it's a completely personal thing. So what has gone wrong in that personal relationship? There are rumors, as I said to you last time, in New York, that that he got offended because Modi spent more time meeting Biden than he did meeting him. I don't think that he met him at all during the campaign. But we need more information, and of course we should stand our ground. And that's not even up for discussion. We should absolutely stand our ground.
Okay, let me get Sushant, since you said he shouldn't carry this chip on his shoulder about, an East India Company type response, and then I'll come to Ambassador Yash Sinha. Go ahead, Sushant. Do you feel, and I mean, here's Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff meeting with Putin in Moscow. I think that's what Tavleen was referring to. I thought he was going later, but he's right there today. And the point she's making is it's the game for him is larger. And we should also play the larger game. I guess that's what she's saying. And how do you respond to what, her argument? Yeah.
So, but I don't have any problem with what Tavleen says, that we need to play the larger game. I completely agree with it. In fact, a lot of things I agree with, but I'll tell you what my points of disagreement are. One, I'm not becoming hysterical. I'm stating a historical fact. What was the East India Company model? The East India Company model was that they were the rulers of this country. And what they were doing is that they systematically destroyed all Indian industry by levying very, very heavy tariffs on anything which went from India to the UK. And they imposed zero tariffs on anything that was imported from the UK into India. Right? So they systematically destroyed the entire manufacturing base of this country. And on top of that, they sucked this country dry by pulling out all the wealth out of this country. Now, unless you are an Anglophile and think that the railways were the greatest boon, or the English language was the greatest boon that the British gave us, or they gave us some kind of a constitutional system, frankly, we weren't doing too badly before that. Okay. And it was not as though the Brits themselves were the most civilized nation in the world, considering the millions of people they butchered in cold blood. So that is one part of it. And this seems to be a similar model, that you do everything for me, I do nothing for you. One. Secondly, on this issue of, I agree that we need to build up our own economy, and I hold successive governments, including the current one, guilty of not bringing in the kind of reforms, of not freeing the entrepreneurial abilities of the people of this country, of continuing to impose all kinds of onerous taxes on them and an inspector Raj on them and harassing people. I completely agree that we need to get rid of this, bring in regulatory reforms, all of that. I've been an advocate of it much before other people had started talking about it, right from the outset when this government came into power, that all the other things you are doing is fine, but you need to put in place legal and regulatory reforms so that people can do business honestly and productively. The third point I want to make is, Tavleen spoke about China. The reason Trump doesn't mention China is because initially he got into a spat with them. He would impose 45% taxes, the Chinese would reciprocate. It went on to a ridiculous level where he had crossed 125 and the Chinese said, okay, we'll stay at 125 because it effectively no trade can take place. And then the Chinese, because they hold the Americans by the unmentionables, they started squeezing. That is when the Americans balked and he pulled back. So the Chinese have certain leverages that we probably do not have or have still not exercised, even if we have any, which is the reason why he's not talking about China. And one last point on this whole Russian oil business. This is such a lot of nonsense which has been spread by these white people. What is the Russian oil? At one level, we are buying Russian oil at discounted rates. So it's not as though the Russians are profiting from us. Anybody who has done any study of how much, at what price the Russian economy breaks even, will tell you that the Russian oil, if it's priced around $80 a barrel, that is the price point at which they start breaking even. Okay. I might be wrong about the figures today, but that was the case about 4 years back, 3 years back. Now, if I am buying it at below the price, I am buying it at majorly discounted rates. Yes, I might be profiting from it, but who is buying my oil? The guys who are buying the oil which I process are the Europeans, who would otherwise have to pay much more money because the oil market would have got completely, there would have been an over demand and not enough supply. So it would have caused supply blockages and it would have caused price hikes. The Americans buy the oil which I process because the American refineries, even though America produces oil, the American refineries are not all equipped to handle the oil which they produce inside the US. So they buy processed oil, which is why they buy oil from all over the place, even though they are big exporters of oil, net exporters of oil.
Yeah.
The point is that the international economy is a lot more complicated, and a thekedar or just a construction magnate who thinks he has all the wisdom of the world, like Indian IAS officers think they have, isn't really getting things in place. So I think we need to be more realistic about what kind of a beast we are dealing with.
Okay, so a lot of swipes there, a lot of sharp comments there, and I could see Tavleen disagreeing with some, agreeing with some, but before, sorry,
a lot of
Tavleen?
tips have been visible. White people. The world is a different place. Eastern Africa, that was we were colonized by the British. There is no way that the Americans are going to colonize us. You stop being so, and we deal with white people.
But isn't it a kind of neo-imperialism to say, I will tell everybody in the world what they should be?
Why is he so soft on yellow people then? Cut that out. That is all
because he's trying to cut a deal with the Chinese. I'm not saying it's racism. I'm saying it's imperious behavior. It's bullying behavior.
Of course it is. He's a bully, and with the only way to deal with the bully, he's a schoolyard bully. So he's not taking on the big boy in this game. And I was speaking of China only in the context of Russian oil. They take a hell of a lot more, and he hasn't sanctioned China. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Hang on, both of you. I need to get Yash Sinha in. Just let's have him in the conversation, and we'll come back to both of you. Abasi Yash Sinha, it is a fiery point of difference. How sensitive should you be about self-respect, drawing your red lines? What's the larger picture to you beyond the Indo-US relationship, which you already mentioned? Of course, Trump's being a bully. Of course, Trump is being typically American in assuming the role of a global arbiter of, who should do what. Of course, he's being a hypocrite. I think the debate between Sushant and Tavleen diverges on, is this, are we being oversensitive about our self-respect here? I don't know. I have a hot-headed response also saying, who the hell is he? But I guess diplomats have more to sort out here.
Barkha, I think I won't get into this argument, but what I will say is that self-respect is very important for any country, and for a country like India, certainly 1.4 billion people, fourth largest economy, about to become the third largest. So certainly self-respect is very important. However, if you see the press release that the MEA came out with, I think it was yesterday, it was very well crafted. It sort of conveyed what it had to convey, and to whoever it was, it was done at the level of our official the spokesperson. And that's how, in my opinion, it should be. I know that in a previous show, I think we were criticized for being too formalistic in one of your previous shows. But I think that was the appropriate response. Now, let's again look at this whole relationship. The US is our largest trading partner, over $200 billion. We are the US's 12th largest trading partner. US companies have invested in across the board about $60 billion into India, and Indian companies have invested $40 billion into the United States. So we must look at what the whole relationship is. And I think rather than playing the larger game, I would play the long game, as one of my colleagues, a former ambassador to the United States, wrote. So I think we really need to handle this carefully. The trade deals, the statistics are very important. I hope I'm sure we have conveyed the correct picture to our interlocutors in Washington, D.C. And if we haven't, there is still time. I know I just saw our ambassador meet Tulsi Gabbard with their respective spouses. I'm sure he's met Pete Navarro and Howard Lutnick, and other important Treasury Secretary, etc. So I think obviously there is something more, as I said earlier. We need to try and fathom what that is, and I think we need to proceed cautiously. However, I agree with Sushant that there is no question of compromising our self-respect. Our position is crystal clear. We cannot be steamrolled. And I'm a sort of person who joined the Foreign Service when the Cold War was still on. So I recall the difficult times that we faced after our nuclear test. I was in Pakistan when our nuclear test took place in '98, and then I moved in the summer to New York, where we were roundly castigated in the UN General Assembly at the special debate. So I'm aware of the situations that we have found ourselves during the Cold War and after vis-a-vis the UN. So I think we have that experience, and I'm confident that we will tide this over. There may be some pain initially, but I think there is the steely resolve that India is more or less, and I use the word more or less, united in standing up to any sort of bullying or arm twisting.
You said India is more or less united, and I would agree, but I should report that Rahul Gandhi, by the way, before I come to Rahul Gandhi, that's the photograph that you were talking about, Tulsi Gabbard, and their meeting with the Indian ambassador and their respective spouses or partners. I want to bring up, just as a matter of detail, what Rahul Gandhi actually said today. He once again brought Adani into it. I'm just trying to look for that particular point, and we can have it on our screen. Rahul Gandhi once again brought Adani, and he said Modi's hands are tied because this is all linked with Adani. I don't know that we want to really spend some time talking about this because there are larger issues to talk about, but for a moment, Yash, if we can start with you, what do you make of this comment?
Barkha, I know your previous program also mentioned, I don't like to get into politics, but this is the theater of the absurd. I mean, every time Mr. Gandhi brings up Adani and attacks the Prime Minister, I mean, I think he even sort of agreed with President Trump that we are a dead economy. So I think I don't want to say anything more on that. And the people of India are fully capable and fully aware of the import of such statements.
Tavleen, Sushant, if you want to come in on this briefly before we come back to the larger issues at play. I'll start with you, Tavleen.
About Rahul Gandhi, my favorite subject.
So you've been told. Yes.
I find it hard to take him seriously, just as I find it hard to take Trump seriously. I find that Rahul Gandhi really doesn't have a clue about what he's saying. There is this thing called, there's a buffer between what you say and what you think. It's called the brain. And I'm not sure that buffer still exists in his head. Because, he just says anything. And, he can change the next day and say something else. And, his whole policy making, his whole, attack is on Modi personally, which is ridiculous because the Congress party should by now have got beyond that and come up with their own. What would they do in this situation? Where is their little shadow foreign minister giving us policy instead of their stupid spokespeople talking nonsense on TV? They don't have anything. And, he doesn't actually say anything that you can discuss as a policy. It's always just a personal attack on the Prime Minister.
And it's hard to say whether he's more fixated on Adani or Modi, but he seems to often club them together. Sushant, two things. One, that he backed Trump for saying dead economy. The second, his comment today, this has come today, that, Modi's hands are tied and they're tied because of Adani, and that's why he's not taking on Trump. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think we are having a nice, serious discussion, even though we disagree with many things we are talking about. And I think we should stick to serious topics, not non-serious people. I think it's a shame that India has a leader of opposition like this. So I don't know. I want to remain parliamentary in your show. So I don't want to say anything else. But I think it's despicable, the kind of stuff the kind of stuff that comes out of his mouth. So let me come down back to some of the most substantial
Sure.
Including taking issue with Tavleen on a couple of things. See, this whole thing that, look, the world has changed, this is not that period. My own sense of history is that the more things change, the more they remain the same. Yes, the circumstances in which new things are playing out might have changed. But come on, are you telling me that racism still does not run deep in American politics? I don't think anybody can make that assertion.
And you've had Trump aides once again link this to H-1B visas. You've had Lindsey Graham, Marjorie Greene actually take this issue and do posts on Twitter saying time to cancel H-1B visas. I mean, we have seen racist comments piggybacking on the tariff debate.
Exactly. And Barkha, all you need to also see is look at the way they treat immigrants, say, from non-white countries and how they treat immigrants from white countries. The difference is very apparent, right? The second thing is that, the reason why I say this is because just a couple of days back, somebody told me that some very senior advisor in the Indian Prime Minister's office is convinced that there can never be war between India and China, and that the Chinese will never try and do something like what they tried and did in 1962. Now, frankly, because this particular person belongs to the Indian Administrative Service, I'm not surprised that he is as dumb as he is, quite apparently. In which world do these guys live? Do they not realize what is happening around the borders, how difficult things are on the frontiers, what are the kind of new challenges which are emerging, how there are powers like China and other powers or non-state or para-state or proto-state actors who are increasingly becoming very powerful and are going to challenge us in one form or another, and that we really need to start rethinking our frontier security. But if you have a guy who's living in cloud cuckoo land in the Prime Minister's office, having the Prime Minister's ear and advising him that nothing of the sort will happen, then it makes you wonder what kind of people are we selecting, which is also the problem in our embassy in Washington. Now, you are meeting after all hell has broken loose. You are posting pictures of your meeting with Tulsi Gabbard and some other people. Why wasn't this done 3 months back? Why are you waking up right now? From what I am hearing, the embassy in Washington, D.C. is so lazy that it can even put, an insomniac to sleep. The kind of stuff which is happening is, it's bizarre. And we seem to imagine that everything is hunky-dory. It's not. So we really need to start re-looking at how we are handling things. There are fabulous professionals in the Ministry of External Affairs, people who know how to work the American system, people who know how to connect, people who have their equities out there, who can exploit those. But you don't want to use them because they were not your translators.
Before I go to Ambassador Yash Sinha on this, because I could see he has some things to say. Given your sweeping assault on the bureaucracy, I just have one question to ask of you. I agree with you on the China issue, but that doesn't leave a lot of good options right now, because you've got a strained relationship with America. You've got the army confirming that China provided more than just weapons to Pakistan in Operation Sindoor. And then you're saying basically our outreach in Washington has failed or been suboptimal. Sushant?
So Barkha, that is clearly a very serious problem which we are going to be facing. And the problem is even more because now, can I actually take the Americans seriously? Can I trust them? Because from what we are hearing, again, this is not confirmed news. These are things which are going around, that the Americans are now even not interested in the Far East anymore or in Asia anymore. They seem to be receding from there, and they seem to have given ground to the Chinese. And they seem to have actually pulled their hands out of Taiwan, which would become a flashpoint had they continued to back the Taiwanese. At least that is the kind of talk. And I've heard General Raj Shukla, somebody I would take with a lot of seriousness. He brings a lot of gravitas with him. And he's a serious scholar, apart from being a soldier. So there are these changes which are taking place. Now, as an Indian, am I going to say that, look, I find my relationship with the United States extremely critical, and no matter what, I will continue to suck up to them, because if tomorrow I have some kind of a scrap with the Chinese, I will have the Americans at my back? I'm not so sure anymore, right? I was not very sure even earlier, but I'm not sure anymore. So I think what we have to do, and that is a no-brainer, we simply have to make sure that we develop our own capabilities. That is one. Barkha, but another very important thing, on this whole trade deal, I'm all for more liberalized trade. I think some of the tariffs which we have in this country are mindlessly crazy, apart from our local GST system, which only an IAS officer could have designed. The kind of complexity which is there, that you have to have 10 people to manage your accounts today, which, otherwise should have been very simple. So I don't want to get into those details. I don't think you have the time, but I think there is a case for reducing some of the tariff barriers that we have. Having said that, look, you also have to ensure that there is some kind of a level playing field for your farming community. For example, on agriculture, on dairy, on some of these other issues, you cannot simply adopt a cavalier attitude and say that we will open up the markets completely, and if millions of Indians go bust, they become uneconomical, they cannot participate in the economy anymore. We don't give a damn about it because we want to please Donald.
But I agree with all the points you've made, but basically the conclusion is there aren't a lot of good options right now. Having reached this point, there aren't a lot of great options except to build your best of bad. Okay. Now, Yashtina, I know that there have been a lot of sweeping comments about the bureaucracy, but Sushant did say that great people in the MEA, they haven't been deployed. And there are serious questions about, messaging, communication, outreach. Where is the diaspora? What are the Satya Nadellas and the Sundar Pichais doing? They all, some of them attended the inaugural.
I wanted to react to what Sushant said initially when he was speaking, but I see that I wanted to tell him that, of course, I didn't choose to join the IS. I chose the Foreign Service. That was my first preference, and I did have a choice. But anyway, I saw that later on he sort of attacked the bureaucracy as a whole, including our embassy in Washington. But be that as it may, I don't want to get into that because I have been ambassador, I've been high commissioner. We build equities outside the official channels, whether it's a foreign secretary whose wife likes yoga, or whether it's a prime minister stroke leader of the opposition whose wife is very friendly with your wife, or whether it's the ruler, the sheikh in the Middle East, and you have a person very close to him. So this is par for the course. We do it all the time, and I do not want to sort of comment on our embassy in Washington because, frankly, I'm sure they would have tried. They would have done their best. I will not comment. However, apart from the official channels, there are other channels that you deal, not just through the embassies. After all, I dealt with so many years and dealt with Pakistan. We had back channels that were working, official and non-official. And with the US, it was such an all-encompassing relationship, starting with the Prime Minister down to the lowest levels. I think, I'm sure we would have tried at various options. However, I won't comment on the performance of our embassy. I'd only defend them as best as I can. But on the tariffs, we are talking about how our tariffs are high. You know what our mean tariff is? 4.6%. You know what the EU's mean tariff is? 5%. You know what Vietnam is 6%. Indonesia is around that much. Bangladesh is 10 point whatever. So it's obviously not the tariff. Look at the tariffs on dairy products into the United States, over 100%. So how can we be accused of trying to be protectionist? And we are a developing country, for God's sake. We are not at the same level as the United States or even the United Kingdom, though we've surpassed them as far as the GDP goes. But I think we need really here to see the whole entire picture. And I think the fact that we are negotiating is very important. We must continue to negotiate. I hope that delegation comes on the 25th of August. And if there are any statements or any insinuations that hurt our self-respect or go against our sovereignty or our integrity, we must respond firmly, but maturely. So I think that would be my advice.
Okay, I've got to close now. Tavleen, let me give you the last word, and Sushant, you can add on a final comment if you want to. We are now getting news talking about China, that the Prime Minister is going to be in China on the 31st of August. So there's a lot happening. This is the SEO summit. If we can just get more details up, this is now news that is breaking now. PM Modi to visit China, his first visit since the Galwan incident in which India lost 20 soldiers in the high reaches of the mountains. Eastern Ladakh now militarized since then. So clearly there is a kind of wide-eyed, cynical transactionalism, not investing only in one sort of side of the world, and that's as it should be. Tavleen, your response? Can we unmute Tavleen, please? Yeah, go ahead, Tavleen.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something Sushant said, which I totally agree with, which is that we've got to strengthen our own economy domestically. These taxes have killed, the GST has killed off small industries. They couldn't handle it. It is so ridiculous, these taxes. So what we need to do with the farmers, where are the cold chains that would give our farmers the ability to get to more markets? Instead of just the farmers were worried about corporatization because they thought Adani was going to come in, he was putting up silos, etc. But those reforms, according to farmers I've spoken to, seemed to be directed towards those who were, producing farm produce, not for farmers themselves. Most of our farmers cannot even afford to get to the local market. 70% of our vegetables and fruit die in the fields. Those are the things we must start addressing. It's crazy. Fruit, flowers, these are tradable commodities if you have the infrastructure. So let's just strengthen our own defenses economically as well as diplomatically. That's all I have to say.
All right, Sushant, quick closing word, and then we have to wrap up for today. Sushant?
So Barkha, look, here is the thing. Again, I can't disagree with what Tavleen is saying about, giving the farmers a fair deal. But to expect that the government can do it, we know that the government can't do it. It's a proven factor. The government, the moment you put government, you want to destroy any industry, form a ministry. They will make sure that they've destroyed that industry. They will kill all initiative. Now, what you really need is to create a framework whereby the private sector can actually profit, and those profits will also benefit the farmers. So you need to create certain structures for that, and you need to think innovatively for that. I would have imagined that the farm laws would have done some of it, not all of it, some of it. Okay, fine. The farmers, at least in Punjab and Haryana, who used to be some of the most progressive farmers in the past, have actually now become completely lazy, and they have now become landlords instead of farmers. So they don't want to do anything, and they have not allowed anything to happen. But I think there is a case to be made for, yes, building up infrastructure, and you have to involve the private sector in that. But aside of that, on this whole GST business, Barkha, allow me to say this because it hurts the hell out of me. Why should you have 10 rates of GST on one product? कि बर्फी है उसके ऊपर परत लगी हुई है तो ये जीएसटी है, उसके ऊपर चॉकलेट है तो ये जीएसटी. तुम पागल हो यार, तुम्हारे दिमाग खराब है. उसमें मीठा कम है तो इतनी जीएसटी है, मीठा ज्यादा है तो इतनी जीएसटी.
I hear you. I feel what you're saying. But I think the point that you're all making is simplify how business is done, how the economy is run. And you have to do this now because you're on your own. Basically, become stronger, be too big to be treated like this. In a way, that's the bottom line. Tavleen, you wanted to add a sentence? I see your hand going up.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say, don't insult farmers in that way. They're not landlords. Do you know how much the agricultural subsidies are in other countries? Agriculture is always subsidized all over the world. And, if the government government can build roads, they can build cold chains. There are things that the infrastructure has to be built by government.
Yeah, they build the cold chains and then look, You build FCI.
No,
and
come
what
on.
is FCI delivered?
There is no profit to be made at the moment for the private sector is not going to invest in cold chains. If the government can build roads and airports, it can build infrastructure for agriculture.
Punjab private sector did invest in cold chains. There were.
We will do another show, a separate show
Yeah,
on
that's,
farm law.
I just wanted to make that point. You're being too dismissive.
Okay, here's my point. I think I should have said and intervened. We will do a separate show on the farm laws. They're a very emotive issue in Punjab. Sushant clearly backs the laws. Tavleen says, do not make sweeping comments about the farmers. I think this issue is too serious to be in the tail end of a program on Trump and Russia and China. Of course, it's all interrelated because in the end, it's about our economy. Until we actually strengthen our economy, that's where China gets its heft from. That's where we will eventually going to get our heft from. I think that we can all agree on. In the meantime, news is breaking at this moment. Not officially announced that the Prime Minister could be in China at the end of this month for the SCO summit, designed to irritate Trump further. But I think, as Tavleen reminds us, Trump's own envoy is in Russia today. Double standards do need to be called out. And India is doing precisely that. We leave it there. To Tavleen, Ambassador Yash Sinha, to Tavleen Singh and Sushant Sareen. Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you and see you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.